Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators, a production of KRWG Broadcasting. Your Legislators is a public service program providing our viewing audience in southern New Mexico the opportunity to hear about important legislative issues directly from their elected representatives in Santa Fe. Here's your host, Sloan Patton.
Welcome to another edition of Your Legislators. With us today is Milan Simonich. He's a reporter with the Texas New Mexico newspapers, and he joins us from Santa Fe. Milan, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Definitely. So the first question I want to move to is there have been a lot of tax proposals introduced. What's the latest on those?
Well, there are over 50 tax credit proposals that have been introduced, as well as a sweeping bill by two Republican legislators from Farmington to eliminate all tax credits in favor of what they're calling a 2% consumption tax. That probably has no chance of going the distance this year, so I'm sure it's in the introductory phase. As for the other individual credits, those all get sorted out in committees. Some of them probably will survive, some of them will not. And of course, the governor ultimately could veto any that do make it through the legislature.
Right. One of the things mentioned several times are the elimination of what people call these golden parachutes for specifically state jobs. When people retire from their jobs or leave a job for the state, they might be given a large severance package, $500,000, almost $1 million. What's been going on with that? Have there been any new bills introduced or new legislation?
There was a bill introduced to cap golden parachutes at $110,000 a year. $110,000, which is the yearly salary of the governor. It failed in committee. The House Speaker, Ken Martinez, led the fight to defeat that bill, which was brought by both a Republican and a Democrat. So that bill looks dead for this session. It was motivated, as you said, by the New Mexico State University case where the former president, Barbara Couture, received $453,000 in return for her resignation, even though she already had another job. But that bill is done. We will see it again next year, but it's already out of contention for this session.
Mm-hmm. The New Mexico compromise gun control bill is now up. Do you see it passing?
Yes, it will probably pass the House of Representatives Wednesday, and then it will move to the Senate, where it also probably will pass. The governor said she would sign it in its current form, so that signals the Republicans who in large number initially opposed it. It's been rewritten to their satisfaction and to hers, so it should pass.
Sure. And on paper, something like that, a Republican signing a gun control bill seems a little bit shocking, but what are some of the details of that bill?
Well, it's a pretty modest bill. Right now, if you or I go to a store to buy a pistol, there's a federal background check on us because those are licensed firearm dealers. If you buy the same gun at a gun show, it's possible that the person selling it is not a federally licensed firearms dealer. Therefore, there is no background check. So all this bill would do is equalize that. So whether you purchased at a gun show or at a store, you would undergo a background check. And the object is to get guns out of the hands of mentally ill people or convicted felons. Colorado has a similar law. It was approved after the Columbine high school shootings in 1999. Obviously, Colorado also last year had the tragedy, the shootings at the theater in Aurora, a Denver suburb. So there's no guarantee that it actually is going to make much of a difference, but the potential is there that it could keep a handgun out of the hands of someone who has been convicted of a felony or who is unstable.
Right. I believe recently there was some legislation specifically in the state about gay marriage. Do you ever see something like that passing in New Mexico?
Well, there are bills to prohibit it. That one was killed, and another bill to legalize it. Those are the kinds of social issues that a lot of legislators do not want to deal with because they consider them wedge issues, that they're not substantive in a 60-day session when you're under the gun to get a budget and to deal with more than 1,000 other bills, many of them dealing with money. There would be a chance that a bill to legalize gay marriage, or at least endorse it, could get through. It would be fought hard by the Republicans, but some of them do not get terribly exercised by those sorts of bills because they have other priorities. So it's possible that that one could make it through. There's not a lot of discussion about it. Legislators are very much in tune with what their own needs and wants are. So that's a bill coming out of the Santa Fe delegation, in particular Representative Brian Egolf, and I'm not sure how much steam it has.
Mm-hmm. As you mentioned, the budget is always probably the biggest issue that everyone has to work out before they leave Santa Fe. What are some of the biggest chunks of that budget that you've seen so far that might cause some problems?
I don't know if any would cause some problems because the governor's proposal and the Legislative Finance Committee's proposal were about the same in terms of the bottom line number, $5.7 billion. They vary slightly. But of course, there's a lot of difference in how the money gets carved up. The legislators are proposing a 1% pay raise, sort of a symbolic gesture for state workers. The governor doesn't want any raises. So that you have those sorts of disputes. The single biggest part of the budget is public education at about $2.5 billion, a little more than that actually. So public schools will be the biggest portion, the lion's share of the budget. The fight there will be, once again, not over so much the money now, but over whether children who are not proficient readers at the end of third grade should be retained by state order, as opposed to the existing system in which a parent has a one-time right to block a retention suggested by a school staff. This will be as we go to the last part of the session, the second half of the session, this will be the big fight in education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was one bill in particular, it was introduced by Senator Peter Wirth, and it was the GMO bill. He's out of Santa Fe, and that bill didn't make it past the first committee, I believe, or it didn't make it to the second committee. Why do you think that bill doesn't seem to be popular with legislators?
Well, I don't know if it's not popular with legislators. It was killed by a procedural move in the Senate. There's a process by which bills that go to committee are then read out to the full floor of either the House or the Senate, and the Republicans used a procedural maneuver to stop that bill. I don't know if I would say it's unpopular. The Senate Minority Leader, Stuart Engel, who comes from Portales, did not like the bill, and he was able to block it. I'm sure we'll see that one back next year with Senator Wirth. It didn't get much of a chance for public conversation because of the procedural maneuver that knocked it out of the water.
Mm-hmm. Just at the beginning of the session, Mary Kay Papin, a Democrat, was elected Senate President Pro Tem. How's that changed sort of the workings of the legislators since she was elected that you know of?
I don't think it's changed much of anything. I think President Pro Tem is more a ceremonial title than an important position. It is The president pro tem has some say-so on committee assignments, but once those are made, and they have been made, there isn't that much in that job. The real power in the Senate is the majority floor leader, Senator Michael Sanchez of Belen. He decides what gets heard on the floor. He decides what does not come to a vote on the floor. So he has a lot more power than the pro tem. I will say that Senator Papin, she's 80 years old. She seems like she's 60. She's a very energetic and bright woman, and she's trying to pull people together. One of her initiatives was the Spaceport Bill, which was important to southern New Mexico. Senator Sanchez, who had been criticized over that bill, actually got a compromise with trial lawyers and the Virgin Galactic, the main tenant at the spaceport. But certainly Senator Papin played a role in that, in trying to make sure that the people in Doñana and Sierra counties who have invested $209 million will have a spaceport operational. We'll see how much business it does. That's always another question. But Senator Papin was important on that. Some people see the pro tem as being more important than I do, but I think the real power in the Senate is the majority leader and not the pro tem.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And well, on the Spaceport Bill, if you're able to, would you be willing to give your opinion on sort of what the business impact of the spaceport, if it were to be finished, what that business impact would really be in southern New Mexico?
Well, who knows? To me, spaceports are kind of like sports stadiums. We don't see a lot of sports stadiums in New Mexico, but typically you look at situations where an NBA team or an NFL team wants a new stadium, and it says, we'll go somewhere else if we don't get the stadium. We need luxury boxes. We need more seats. We need to be able to make more money. And the spaceport right now is, to me, somewhat analogous to that. It's saying other states are offering better liability deals. That's why New Mexico had to do this limited liability law that would protect spaceport manufacturers and suppliers from lawsuits in the event of a catastrophe, if you had a crash. So what it actually is going to do is impossible to predict. And just like you don't know if a team is going to stay in a particular market, you don't know if this is going to work. We all hope it works, because if tourists came to New Mexico, used the spaceport, saw the rest of the state, that would be good. Whether that's going to happen or not, who knows? Certainly the state has tried to put a structure into place with the facility, and now it has this enabling law almost on the books. Each chamber has passed a version of it, and certainly it's going to be approved. So we'll see if that actually translates to jobs. I learned a long time ago not to say that anything is set in concrete until the concrete is set. We'll see if they actually deliver. If we end up with a working operation for space travel that brings people and business to the state. That's the goal. We'll see if it happens.
Mm-hmm. And so I remember back at the State of the State, the governor mentioned driver's licenses and said that it was her #1 priority to get a new bill passed, new law passed. With the driver's license law, why do you think that it has so much political steam behind it?
Well, it doesn't have any political steam behind it. The bill she favored was buried in a House committee pretty early on, and it has not moved. It's stuck there. If there is to be a compromise bill, it would have to be introduced by Thursday. That's the deadline to file legislation. So right now, it looks like that bill is not going to go anywhere.
Yeah. Do you think that that might have been one reason why she mentioned it in the State of the State to sort of try to give it some sort of momentum that it might not have in the legislature?
Well, she campaigned on that, on repealing the law that enables illegal immigrants who live in New Mexico and have proper identification to get driver's licenses. She calls it a dangerous law, and it was one of the things she ran on in 2010. The legislators who are in control, the Democrats, by and large, disagree with her. They don't think it's a dangerous law. They think it is a sensible law, because everybody knows there are people who are here unlawfully. Many of them, according to the Democrats and according to a lot of other people, are doing backbreaking jobs. They are needed in the economy, in oil fields, in farm labor, landscaping, to some degree construction. For instance, the chili industry, which is seeking one of the subsidies that you mentioned earlier, said that one of the reasons we have fewer chili farms in New Mexico is we do not have laborers the way we used to have. Most laborers on chili farms are Mexican nationals. In New Mexico, they average 60 years of age. So those people are doing a backbreaking job, and the Democrats say, give them a driver's license. What's wrong with that? Now, of course, the governor, as I say, campaigned on the repeal, but she's been largely quiet about this issue since the bill that she wanted, the repeal bill, was bottled up in a House committee. And we'll see if there's any other bill that emerges by the filing deadline. Something could pop up in the Senate, or there could be a different version in the House, but we're getting down to the deadline.
Well, with that deadline coming up on us, is there any legislation that that's really being pushed towards the end here that you know, that some senators or representatives specifically want to really push here in the next couple of days?
Well, all individual senators and representatives have bills they want to push.
Sure.
Some of the things that should be done and should be pushed would be the constitutional amendments that the voters approved last November. 3 of those deal with the State Public Regulation Commission. One would move the insurance division out, make it a separate entity with an appointed insurance commissioner. Another would move some corporation filing functions to the Secretary of State. And the most controversial one that the legislature is dealing with is establishing qualifications for the 5 elected public regulation commissioners. Right now it's a minimum standard. You only have to be 18 and have no felonies. The legislature's job, according to the ballot issue that the voters passed, is to increase those qualifications. So those will be dealt with down the stretch. We'll see if they get them all done and the enabling laws implemented. There's another one of those. The voters also passed a constitutional amendment that removes the State Public Defender's Office from the governor's control, puts it under an independent commission, so the chief public defender would not be hired or fired by the governor any longer, but by an independent branch. And that enabling law also has to be approved by the legislature. We'll see that happen in the next 30 days probably.
And with the along with the minimum standards, I heard that there was a bill that was being introduced that would change the ability to vote in a primary. You could vote in a primary if you were going to be 18 by election day. So you could, in theory, vote at 17 in a primary, and then go ahead and vote in the regular election if you were 18 in time.
You're right. That's a bill by Representative Jeff Steinborn, a Democrat from Las Cruces. If you're 17 years and 8 months old when the primary occurs, you could vote because you'd be 18 in time by the time the general election occurred. And that bill got out of committee, the House Voters and Elections Committee, by 1 vote. But a Republican did vote for it in committee. So I suspect that one will make it through both the House and the Senate. Whether it gets signed by the governor might be another matter. There are some of the Republican objections to that are that they don't think the U.S. Constitution allows for people younger than 18 to vote in elections. So that may be the stumbling block, although 16 states already have a law that allows people who are 17 but will be 18 by the time of the general election to vote in the primary election. So it's not new territory, it's new for New Mexico, but a number of other states already do it.
Do you know offhand if any of our neighboring states do that?
Offhand, I don't. Texas does not, but I'm not sure about Arizona or Colorado.
Right. Okay. And so with, well, going back to the public school issue, and especially the finance issue of public schools, Is there any legislation in that would deal with charter schools in communities, or is that going to be something that stays local?
Well, charter schools aren't exactly local. You can get a charter through a school district, the Albuquerque Public Schools or the Las Cruces schools, but the state Public Education Commission can also charter a school. And in fact, the majority of charter schools now are obtained through the state commission and not through a school district. I was at a committee hearing yesterday where the number of charter schools came up. Albuquerque has 55 charter schools right now, and some of them are not doing well. Some of them are not highly rated schools, and they are right near a public school. So the system in some cases may have spun out of control. I mean, the charter school concept has always been confusing to me. Unless it has a particular mission, it's going to, a school that's going to work with the hardest cases, the kids who are really struggling and need a different, non-traditional environment. That was sort of the original concept of why you do a charter. Or it's an arts school, like the old Fame television show. Now we seem to have an abundance of them, particularly in Albuquerque, and not all of them are performing well. Some of them are performing considerably less well than the public schools that are nearby.
To help prevent something like that from happening, do you think that that the standards should be raised, or do you think it should not continue to go through the state commission and just go through the public school system?
No, I think it should go through the state Public Education Commission. I think that's the better place, because a school district has sort of a natural and selfish reason not to want competition. Every kid you move from a public school to a charter school, you lose funding. So the school districts tend to frown on charter schools, whereas the state commission really is in the best position to decide the merits of that school and whether it really enhances educational opportunities in a city or a county.
Right. Another issue that that was brought up and has been mentioned many times during the session is DWI laws, and I'm sort of looking through the list of some of the ones that are up. Are there any that the legislature seems to favor over others as far as DUIs go?
Well, there's a push and a common sense push to strengthen the laws for repeat offenders.
Right.
We have cases where people have 4, 5, 10 cases of drunken driving, and people wonder, how does that happen? How does someone avoid long-term prison for that type of offense or those type of repeated offenses? So that's one of the bills, and as there are others in the mix, but the idea of the repeat offender, repeat drunken driving offenders have also been the cause of an uptick in fatalities, highway fatalities. So that is a particular area of concern nationwide, but especially in New Mexico, where we have a bad history of drunken driving and of the same drunken drivers repeating that behavior.
New Mexico really does have a large history of that. Why do you think that's been the case?
Well, I suppose there are issues of alcoholism in certain counties in particular. As you get out toward McKinley County, I think actually had an initiative going back more than 20 years, a special local tax to try to combat drunkenness, alcoholism, drunken driving with more treatment centers, more treatment programs. But some of it may be cultural, some of it is irresponsible. I've worked in 5 states, and every state I've ever worked in has had drunken driving tragedies. People on the roads, intoxicated, unable to function properly, and they kill multiple people. So it's not we're not immune from that in any state. Here it seems to be more problematic, even with a small population. Exactly why that is, I'm not sure. Some of it probably is a culture of drinking.
Mm-hmm. And as we get towards the end of our show here, I just want to touch briefly on what bills you think will pass related to Medicaid. Anything that's attached to the governor's recent approval to go ahead and take federal funds for Medicaid. Is there anything else bill-wise that you think will pass connected to it?
Well, yeah, something's probably going to pass because though the governor did not favor the national health care program, Obamacare, she has agreed that it's the law of the land and it will be implemented. How it gets implemented, a senator from Albuquerque, Gerald Ortiz-Pino, he has a plan that would, what he says would involve lawmakers as opposed to letting the insurance industry write those rules up. It's one of the more complex bills. We still have a month to go, so we'll see how far he gets with that and how willing the executive is to that type of dialogue with a senator. They don't see eye to eye on much, but this might be an area where there is room for them to build a bridge, because we're going to have Medicaid devoted to the national health care program through a New Mexico operation. So we'll see how they blend that.
All right. Well, Milan, thanks so much again for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Definitely. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you again next week.